Hello, folks, and welcome back. It's Indaba Conversation with Chris. My guest today is Rick Springfield. I'm sorry, it's Chris Ehlers. Looks a lot like Rick Springfield over there. We're going to sing Jesse's Girl tonight. Welcome back. Folks, before we get into it, I want to welcome Chris and thank Chris for asked rather adamantly that we have a chance to discuss this topic. You know, I've talked about it many times on the channel about the issue of transgenderism, and Chris is getting up and disappearing. I'm not sure what's going on there. But
Copy.
Okay, but from a perspective of how it's been misused, in my view, for political purposes, and how it undermines the health and safety of minor children and for political agendas, and it's life altering. It really is an issue. Now, Chris is a person who's experienced this and gone through it in his lifetime. We're going to talk about that in just a moment when he comes back. But I'm going to tell you what I understand of Chris's life, and then I'll let Chris correct anything I got wrong. So, can you still hear me, Chris?
I'm right here.
Okay, so a couple of years ago, Chris appeared on my program, and he appeared under the username Christine Ehlers, okay? And, you know, I can't always keep up with the chat, so I heard chat going back and forth, and I got a little confused about what was going on, because then one day Christine became Chris on the username on YouTube. And Chris talked about transgenderism. And from what I understand, Chris grew up biologically as a boy, as a male. And then I suspect probably had some challenges or maybe perhaps gender dysphoria, and felt as if there was a different person inside, and served in the South African Defense Force in the Bush War. You can correct me if I'm wrong when I'm done here. And then after that, at some point, went through a gender transition. I don't know how far the gender transition went, whether it involved hormones or operations or just counseling. I don't know. So Chris is going to talk to us about that and about the challenges that it presents for people, and then going to correct anything I wrong. And just a couple of years ago, Chris, I believe, detransitioned back to being male. And I had the pleasure of meeting Chris at Opiplas earlier this year when Chris set up my meet and greet, which was huge. It was the biggest one. We're just talking about this. I keep saying 300 people, but we both think it was a lot more than 300 people showed up that day. It was massive. It might have been 500, but I didn't want to be, boastful. Yeah. So anyway, it's a little hard to hear Chris because he's using a laptop. But anyway, what did I get wrong about talking about you? Have I gotten anything wrong about who you are, where you came from, and where you are now?
No, everything's spot on. You left out of other things, but obviously some things are better kept secret. So I grew up in a very, very conservative Afrikaans, English, Irish home. Attended an Afrikaans school, one of the elite schools in Pretoria. Did my 2-year military service. Lost three friends in Angola. Came back. Let's backtrack a bit. At school, I never dated. I had no interest in dating. And it's not that's not something that was a conscientious choice. Personally, I think that is something that came natural, maybe because of my gender dysphoria. So obviously, there was no interest in any sexual contact with anyone. So I basically grew up alone. I had a brother, which obviously he passed away when he was 21. But yeah, so I went to the army, came back, ended up with extreme PTSD, and I actually ended up being treated at one of the leading PTSD clinics in Pretoria, where the police at the time also used to go. And there, a forensic psychiatrist actually diagnosed me with gender dysphoria because I explained to him what I'm experiencing. I didn't know, there wasn't a name for it. Now, you must know, this was 2009. In 2009, South Africa did not really know what. No, this wasn't 2009. Sorry, this was 1989, I think. 89.
I was going to say, I thought it was a lot sooner than that. So let me just interrupt for a second, Chris. So you went to the clinic to get treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder based on your combat experience and losing your comrades in combat and the horrors you had to deal with there. And at that stage, in the late 1980s, they diagnosed you obviously with PTSD, but also with gender dysphoria based on where you were coming from.
Correct, yes. Okay, so obviously the gender dysphoria was secondary, but when you look at PTSD, I mean, PTSD is not a diagnosis on its own. PTSD, obviously, it's linked to uh, anxiety and depression and all that type of stuff. So when we started looking at the depression stuff, it opened up a whole avenue of depression that went way back into my childhood. And that's where the door opened basically for gender dysphoria. Obviously, at 10 or 12 years old, you don't know what gender is. I mean, I knew there was something wrong, but it's firstly, it's a very conservative world. We still had the Immorality Act, which was a criminal act, where if any gay person appeared on the street with another gay person in some sort of act, you'd be locked up. So it was a subject that was taboo.
So, Chris,
No one.
let me interrupt you for a second. Sorry, because I just to frame it so that we understand. So, already at an early age, at say 10 or so, you knew something wasn't right. Something isn't the way it's supposed to be. And you're growing up in a very conservative society, Dutch Calvinist, which there are very tight rules here about social behavior. At that
Yes.
age, when you say something wasn't right, did you not feel attracted to women at that age and felt attracted to men, or you weren't attracted to anybody and just it felt odd in your body? I'm trying to get a feel for what happened.
Yeah. So I would say I was asexual, but what I saw didn't register in my mind with what I understood. So I was uncomfortable in my own body, and it's a very difficult thing to explain because I mean, where does something like this originate? This is not a conscientious choice from a child of even 12 years old to decide I don't feel comfortable in my own body. So that avenue then, along with the PTSD and depression and anxiety and everything else, was explored by probably one of the best forensic psychiatrists in the country, which it's subsequently passed away. So I said, well, look, we're going to have to explore this in both ways. And I mean, I didn't know what the process was and why. He then suggested I start living as a female. Now, I understand growing up in basically a dual language conservative home was extremely difficult. I mean, how do you express something like this to your parents? I mean, obviously, my mother was Irish, they're German Afrikaans. And my father, from previous conversations, he would say, I'm going to first say it in Afrikaans and then I'm going to translate it. Ons gaan julle reg donder. So what that means is, if some person is veering off to something strange, we will beat that out of you. So you'd say, no, I think that the depression that's linked to being transgender or gender dysphoric was linked to that fear of my father becoming physical in beating something out of you, which obviously you had no control over. Now, here I must stress, at any point in time, you do have a choice. Retrospectively, now, yes. You do have a choice in what you do. But psychiatry and the medical fraternity are guilty here of perpetrating crimes. They are not upholding the Hippocratic Oath.
Of doing no harm.
First, do no harm.
So, Chris, it sounds like the direction we're going to head in this conversation. Again, folks, I'm going to mention it. Apologies for the clipping of the microphone and for the poor quality. We know about this. There's nothing we can do at the moment. Chris and I have agreed that if we need to, if it's so poor people can understand it, we'll repeat this later with different equipment. We tested ahead of time on his end. It's just a little bit of trouble there. But let me get back to the conversation with Chris now, not the audience. So, Chris, it sounds like you're going to have some very negative things to say about the medical community and about how they treat people. So let me just, before you do that, I believe what's happened here is that you are diagnosed with gender dysphoria by the leading psychologist in South Africa. And the recommendation was you live as a woman. So begin dressing, living as a woman without any changes. Yes. And at some point you must have, I believe you actually transitioned, or maybe you didn't, but you can get to that. And then at some point you realize that you were, my words, not yours, you were being scammed, you were being misled, and it did grave harm, and you weren't happy, and you've detransitioned. What part of that did I get wrong?
Okay, so I got the diagnosis. Now this was in '89, so obviously now I'm studying my degree and working at Ehlers Aircraft, where we used to build some of the best aircraft in South Africa, military aircraft. And I continued my life as Chris for many years until I got married in somewhere in the 90s. Excuse me for not remembering the date exactly, but I got married to a female, which was a colleague at a company I was working for, which eventually I took to court. But I got married, so I lived a normal life. And it was a constant battle fighting this insanity in my mind that this is not who I am. So eventually the marriage came to an end. I don't want to go into the reason why. It wasn't my fault. The marriage came to an end, and at that point I decided, well, I've done everything society has expected. It hasn't worked for me, and I then started transitioning. Now that was, I don't want to lie, I think around 2007 or 8. I was then working for an Austrian company, and that ended up in a discrimination case in a Supreme Court, where they were found guilty of discrimination based on gender. Actually, it's a precedent-setting case in South Africa, which actually set a lot of precedent in American cases where gender was also prevalent.
So, Chris, so you had a lawsuit against your employer because they were discriminating against you. Now, this is when you were identifying as a woman. That's how they were discriminating against you, correct?
Yeah.
Or was it because they were aware that you were transgender, or was it? Which was the reason?
It was basically, I was basically then in the process of transitioning. So they maybe tried to argue that, well, we hired a male, and now you're becoming a female. So how can they be? But the company themselves weren't actually initially at fault. The discrimination came from a child that, I'm not going to go too much into the details because it's history. But
no, there's no need to go into the detail. Just for the broad brushes so people understand. So you went through I would argue, a landmark court case related to gender discrimination.
Yes, it actually set a precedent. So if you go into the law books, I will be mentioned along with my advocate and attorney in this court case on gender discrimination. Obviously, went through the court case. I won the court case. But when you look at what it costs to go into litigation and a court case like this, it is extremely expensive. Now, you must remember this was 2009 or 2010. The 2 years litigation alone was 1,200 rand an hour. And I don't know how many I don't know how many times I saw my attorney over the 2 years, but it was 2, 3, 4 times a week over the 2 year period. Then we were given 5 days in court. Now, you know, this is not uh, a lower court. This was the Supreme Court because the Labour Court is a Supreme Court. So I had to have an advocate and the attorney represent me. And the advocate alone cost me 80,000 rand a day in court.
Wow.
And so we were in court for 5 days. That's excluding my then psychiatrist, who was an expert witness. I don't know how much he got paid, but he got paid a small fortune too. We then, the judge, obviously, from I think it was the second or third day, he had seen that the company had lost. And he kept on asking, when are the parties going to sit down to an expensive lunch? Obviously, I didn't know what that meant. What it meant was
A settlement.
You people better sit down to a settlement because this is going to cost you a lot of money. And it did cost a lot of money. There was also part of the judgment that said the company has to train its employees on how to deal with matters relating to gender.
Mm-hmm.
But they were in breach of court when you ignore the court ruling.
In contempt.
Yeah, they were in contempt of court. They also the finding was also that I returned to work. The company refused.
I bet they probably love that verdict. Not.
For sure. So anyway, we went back to the Supreme Court again, and I was sitting on the phone with my advocate, and they were trying to negotiate a settlement. And they'd come back with a value, and I'd say I refuse this value, and we kept on negotiating higher and higher and higher. Until eventually I got sick of negotiating, and I said, okay, settle. So that was settled. But you must understand, living or fighting a case like this does more harm than good. Yes, I did win this. I did win the case.
But the stress and the uncertainty and the notoriety.
The notoriety. I mean, if you go and look into the transcripts of the court, you will see that even the judge said explicitly, I was the best in the industry. But not one of my competitors' clients would even touch me because of the fear that something like this could happen to them. And it doesn't matter how much you tell somebody, look, that was not supposed to happen. Companies cannot afford that risk. I mean, this was a multinational company, so they had the money to try and fight this. Local companies that were bankrupt to go through a case like this. So anyway, I then ended up homeless.
So what happened with the judgment? Did they not pay the judgment? Did you get bankrupt because your legal fees, or was it ever settled? Did you ever get it sorted?
Well, there was a settlement. The fees were paid, but after 2 years of litigation, all my bills and stuff they stacked up. And at that stage, I was still paying my student loan as well. So I settled everything I could settle, and there was nothing left after that.
Oh, shame. So now you're out of job. You're dealing with gender dysphoria. You're living as a woman in a society that doesn't look kindly on that. You've become quite famous unintentionally through a court case that drug on for 2 years while you were unemployed, and now you're homeless.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, I have to say, no wonder you're cranky sometimes in the chat. I understand. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
I'm bipolar, so I can get cranky, and that's not an excuse to get cranky. Bipolar people use getting cranky as an excuse. There is no excuse.
No, it's not.
Any of these mental illness.
It's not an excuse, but it is an explanation in a way to understand where people are coming from. So it's anyway. But all right, let's go on from there then. So now you're homeless. What happened next?
So now I'm living in a park right across the road from the church I got married in. I approached the church to see if they could help me, and they flatly ignored me. I mean, they knew who I was, but no, you're homeless. We don't want anything to do with you. So I'm not sure how long I was homeless, but anyway, I continued to fight. I didn't beg for anything. I refused. I went out with the point of view, if I'm going to die homeless, that's fine, but I'm not begging. So every now and again, somebody would just leave something in the park, would leave it there for me with a note. And then this one day, this lady left some clothes and a Bible. Now, I had not been a Christian. I mean, like most South Africans, because I grew up in a Christian home, I thought myself to be Christian, which was so far from the truth. And there I have to also correct a lot of content creators. South Africa is not 83% Christian. That's a lie. A maximum of 20% of South Africa is Christian. The rest are just cultural. I don't want to say.
I think the best word here, Chris, and I understand where you're coming from, but those identifications are done because they're considered nominal Christians. So it's the same in Europe. The Europeans say they're Christian, but most of those people never go to church. They don't profess their faith. They may have attended church as a child, been baptized. They're nominally Christians, nominally Jews, same sort of thing. America is a very devout country, but we're becoming less devout as time goes along. But I understand where you're coming from. But the statistics are given for that reason, given for a specific reason. But yet, we'll say that most South Africans who are Christians are nominal Christians. They're not practicing in any deep way. Many of them. Okay.
Yeah. So then I approached an Afrikaans church. Even worse. This is the NG Kerk. I normally call them the Sparkplugs Church because NGK is a Sparkplug brand in South Africa. So I call them the NGK Church. There I was treated even worse. There I was chased away like a dog. But I had a Bible. So I said, okay, God, so your people are treating me like trash. And I started reading the Bible, and all these verses and things come up, and treat a stranger this way, all those good Bible verses. And I thought, okay, I'm declaring war against God.
All right. That'll be your second war
The most insane thing you could ever think of. So anyway, I ended up meeting up with a whole lot of homeless black women, or not homeless black women that used to work in homes around the area. And we would start sitting talking about the gospel and all this stuff. And they never really asked why. I mean, they just accepted, okay, I'm homeless and I'm here. And then this one lady challenged me, are you too afraid to go to church? That was a big mistake. I'll go to church with you. This is an open invitation to go into God's house and declare war on God in his house. Now, this is a church that was founded by Wilf Mayer's son and somebody else. So the challenge was big. They let me rant and rave and spew my racism because obviously I had still fostered that racism that was taught up in Angola. I mean, to get rid of that or to let go of that kind of racism, obviously because of what we saw in townships with the necklacings and the way they used to kill each other with machetes, and up in Angola it was even worse. The things we saw there was just inhumane. So I carried that race with me as well. So I went and I joined this church. Thankfully, it's not a happy, clappy, funky church. It was just a bunch of normal people teaching the gospel, and they allowed me to spew my stuff. And then one day I got to two parts of scripture, Romans 1 and 1 Corinthians 6. Now, these two parts of scripture are the fundamental core of everything that's gone wrong in society, and specifically with what's the right word? Sexual deviance and sexual immorality. And I went to war with those two parts of scripture. Until one day, people will think this is weird, but the Holy Spirit came and touched me and showed me exactly what this was and what was going on. You know, and from then on, it was a part of repentance and deciding to walk away from this whole transgender thing. So obviously, I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere because to detransition medically is extremely expensive. It costs more to detransition than what it does to transition.
So, Chris, if I interrupt for a second here, this sounds like a journey not just of who you are and your transgenderism, your just gender dysphoria, but also a journey of faith in the end.
Faith is the biggest part of this whole journey.
Okay.
Without that faith, I would not be sitting where I am now.
I have a feeling, Chris, you don't have to answer this question, but based on having met you and having interacted with you over time, I have a feeling if you didn't find your faith that you may have done something to yourself and you wouldn't be with us anymore.
I've actually tried suicide 3 or 4 times.
Yeah,
I got up in Sterkington.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
Yeah. And I mean, even in the hardest times now, that fleeting thought of suicide will pass my mind, but it's fleeting.
Yeah.
Because there is a better fight to fight. I mean, I have many reasons to commit suicide. I mean, it's just. I'm not going to go into.
Yeah, let's not go into that. I just wanted to put people in the right frame of the conversation. What we're talking about here, it's quite serious stuff, and it's your life. It's what you've lived. So the church, you went to war with this part of scripture, and then you were touched by the Spirit, and you found your faith. And was that a turning point? And when was that happened to you?
I'd have to go and look on my Facebook because I remember being baptized. Now, obviously, the baptism is not what brought me to faith. What brought me to faith was the Holy Spirit, and in a strange way, God actually allowing me to fight, which actually was a fight within myself, and then finding faith in that fight, which you can only argue so much against the truth. And really, the Holy Spirit touched me. Mm-hmm. And when the Holy Spirit touched me, said, "You are mine." Everything just dropped off. You know, then I became a member of the church, and then they were all accepting from the beginning, but they made it known from the start. This is not God's will. Mm-hmm. There are only males and females. And the same goes for homosexuality. You're welcome in the church, but you are sexually immoral. Your behavior is sexually immoral. Now, people can say, but
Do you,
you do have a choice.
do you have a cat? I think I see a tail wagging in the background. Sorry, I didn't mean to like. That's a beautiful cat. I saw this tail whopping around back there.
I have 3 cats.
Okay, all right. That's sorry. It's just a little distracting. Like the tail just started wagging in the background. Okay.
She loves the attention. So anyway, so a lot of people will say, but it's acceptable to be gay. It's not. If you are saying that you were born that way, now I'm going to say something very, very horrible. If you are saying homosexuality is the way you were born, then you have no right to say to a pedophile that he is wrong, because it's exactly the same.
Because they're also born that way is the point.
They're also born that way.
But
So
Chris, as far as Christianity and faith, when it comes to homosexuality, it is something that is shunned in the Bible. But that doesn't mean that Christians shouldn't love their brothers and sisters who are homosexuals. It's immoral, but you still love them. They should still be welcome into church. Yes.
So this is the catch. You as a homosexual are welcome in the church, but no, we condemn your lifestyle.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it is against God's creation.
It's against God's will.
It's against it. There we go.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Well, we want to make sure we're understood.
And that's the wish of coming to repentance. In saying, and I promise you, it's extremely difficult. I'm going to use myself as an example. It was extremely difficult for me to say, okay, Christine is fake. I'm going to let that go and I'm going to live Chris. For a person to admit a mistake that massive, it could lead to suicide.
I can imagine it can't be easy because your whole identity is what you're challenging. So, how long did you live as Christine? I think that's an interesting question.
6 years.
6 years. Okay. Oh, okay. So it wasn't like 30 years. It was 6 years. Okay. Because I met that lady who is the oldest transgender in South Africa, the original one. She was very entertaining. She insisted on having a photograph with me at in Strand. But so obviously that person has lived that way her entire life since the transition. So about 6 years. But nonetheless, that became who you were. And now you have to say, wait, that's not really who I am. And you have to challenge everything. So I can imagine that had to be pretty traumatic.
It was extremely traumatic. I went into a very, very, very deep depression about that. And there's also another story of the Holy Spirit taking a walk with me. I'll tell you one day. But yes, denying yourself is probably the most difficult thing you can do. And that's true for being homosexual, for being addicted to pornography, transgenderism, any even addiction. I mean, I was addicted. I was an addict. Like long before I was homeless, I was using heroin.
Oh my goodness. Was that because you did it recreationally, or was it to ease the difficulty of the life you were living?
No, it was actually just to try and destroy myself.
Okay, all right. You're trying to harm yourself. That's why you did that.
Yeah.
Okay,
gotcha. So, you can't really then say, oh well, he committed suicide, and
gotcha.
I was trying to overdose.
I got you.
So,
Yeah, somebody said we've got Luva Eve in here. Luva Eve says gay and proud of it. That's awesome. Listen, I'm not gay, but I am very happy. I don't think that counts. You know, that word has been changed. It used to mean happy, gay, but I'm very happy.
yeah,
Just thought I'd share that.
yeah, no. Look, I have a lot of sympathy for homosexuals and transgender people, but I have to speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Stay away from psychiatry and medicine when you're sitting with a problem like this. Stay away from them. Thankfully, South Africa's program is bankrupt, but there is a massive problem in South Africa where they are still allowing people to medically transition with the drugs. So you've still got men walking around as men dressed as women. Now, those people face a very, very, very big challenge, especially going into the townships, because that is not accepted in the black culture at all. Homosexuality, lesbianism, transgenderism, the people get killed for that.
Well, and we've seen, like in Cape Town, they gang rape lesbians to convert them to being heterosexuals. It's a very bizarre world that people live in there, to say the least.
Yeah, I think it's called Ukutela.
Yeah, it is. That's what it's called. Yep, I couldn't think of the word. Yep. No, it's pretty crazy.
They,
Hey, Chris, I want to come back to the psychology thing in a second, but I did want to get a comment that came earlier just about your previous experience, because Charles van Onselen said he knows a little about you, and that you were in the middle of some really deep shit in the border war, and he offered you a salute.
Thank you very much, Charles. Yes, we've all got our dog tags.
Yep. Yeah, mine are here somewhere.
Come with the blood stains and all the crap that goes with it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to disrupt it, but I didn't want to forget that comment because I posted earlier that Charles put there. So I think a lot of people, without getting into your war experience, well, that's not what we're here to talk about, but I think a lot of people don't appreciate the crap that soldiers saw. And in the border war, in the townships, these are things that would make people want to off themselves just watching these things. It takes an awful lot, and that has to have played a role in how your life developed. So, all right, so 6 years. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So and that's actually why I ended up in Vista Clinic in Centurion for 9 months. It was to try and deal with this PTSD. I mean, you must understand that not everybody is made the same. I mean, we all deal with that kind of trauma differently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had childhood trauma too, but we all deal with that trauma differently. And to state this in a simple fact, to pick up a rifle, aim it at somebody and shoot them, you cannot recall that bullet.
No, that's an act that cannot be reversed. It's not a VHS tape. You can't reverse it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or even I had what we call a Snopius. It was a rocket launcher, 40 rocket launcher, and at that time we were still using white phosphorus. You know what white phosphorus does to a human body. So those are images you live with. You walk around with that aggression and that break in your psyche, and that's just 9 months of therapy did nothing for me.
No, I can imagine. Mad Max says, Chris, it takes a man to tell a story like you do. You're honest to yourself, and that's what counts. That was nice. Came along with a super chat, by the way. Yeah.
And I've got electroconvulsive therapy as well. Which
oh my gosh!
Destroyed repeatedly, and that destroyed a lot of my memory. You go to a war, you come back broken, start using drugs, try to off yourself with drugs, trying to hang yourself and whatever. And then you still get the ECT on top of it, so you just get destroyed even more.
So, Chris, let me interrupt here for another question about this. I'm curious about your family. I mean, I don't know if you can share this or not. Obviously, I get the impression your father is a strict, domineering, disciplinary person. But what about your mother? Was there any empathy for you from your parents at any stage? I mean, are your parents still around or have they passed?
My mum, both my parents have passed. My sister, yeah, there's a bit of history there. She initially rejected me. My mother and father didn't really know because they never spoke about it. I mean,
Well, I
my father,
imagine they had no idea how to deal with this situation. It's not something that they'd
no,
experienced growing up.
even depression was not something that was discussed in our age. You speak about depression, you get beat to a pulp, especially in the Afrikaans community. But anyway, so now my parents didn't really know. But when my mother passed away, I started speaking about this, and my father totally flopped. Completely. He totally broke off all contact with me. And then my sister followed. And obviously, after being homeless and getting into this church, I one day decided to contact my dad and just say, just come to church with me. Obviously, he had in his mind it's this funky church, a bunch of gays and stuff
Well,
running
yeah, it
around.
must be some gay rainbow church because my son is some gay weirdo. So I'm gonna, I don't want to. That's what he was thinking, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah. So after about a month of going to church with me, he said to me, I can't believe these people are so loving.
Hmm.
Because obviously, he'd been to church, but he wasn't a Christian. And that church brought him to faith. And very sadly, before he died, he said to me, my boy, did I harm you in any way? And I said to him, no, that's not my place to condemn you. I was grateful that he had found his way to God before he died.
Well, that's actually a good story. It's good to hear that.
So we mended our fences. I got my sister into the church as well. But
Wow.
something went wrong.
Well,
Thereafter,
you're
next,
you're like the Mormons, man. You're out there prophesizing, growing the church.
I was actually very, very successful at drawing people to the church. And obviously now, because of all my disabilities and my illness and stuff, I'm very limited as to what I can do. But I was grateful to mend that relationship with my father and to see him off to God.
Well, that's pretty awesome. Nick Groves, also a vet. Nick said, "Tell Chris the White Army and the world in general is a warmer place with him in it." There you go.
Thanks, bud. Out to the overall.
Yep, that's pretty awesome to
And
hear.
he refuses to be a corporal, but he is. He's
You
going
know,
to take charge.
I know he's a corporal. Yeah, Nick is definitely. I know. Yeah, Nick is the guy that went all the way from PE to Cape Town, and I only had like 15 minutes to spend with him. I felt horrible about that. Nick is a really reliable guy, good guy. So, okay, Chris, let's jump around a little bit here because I think we're getting a little sappy and teary eyed here, both of us here. So, let's jump around a little bit. Okay, so you lived 6 years as a woman. Now, I mean, I don't mean to be prying, but the question's been asked a couple times, and you don't have to answer it. It's your prerogative, and I don't mean to offend. But the question is because people are curious. When you began transitioning to woman, was this just a psychological transformation, or did you take hormones and have surgery? And because I think people are asking that question several times in chat. I don't think they're being disrespectful. I think they're curious with good reason.
No. Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I would expect that question. If you don't, there's something wrong. So I didn't really need much hormones. And so this is where the gender dysphoria becomes a bit blurred. So the genetic analysis still showed male, but my estrogen was on the very high end of the spectrum.
Oh, okay. So you had a natural. I don't want to. This is not intended in a bad way, but let's say since you're biologically male, you had a natural imbalance in estrogen production. You had an abnormally high level of estrogen, naturally.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Got it.
And not that I was specifically effeminate. I was actually very, very aggressive young man. I mean, if somebody went and made trouble with my brother, I would go and beat the crap out of him. Oh, yes. In the army too, I was super aggressive.
Yeah.
But yes, I was not effeminate, but I didn't really need much medication in the transition process. But obviously, I did the medical transition as well. Obviously, I had slight breasts growing up, but with a little bit of medication, I developed normal breasts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, like I said, for me to detransition medically, it's out of the question. It costs too much.
So now you live with the the outcome. I don't want to say consequences, but you live with the outcome of that transition. That's who you are now.
The consequences.
Okay, consequences.
Like Paul has a thorn in his flesh. This is my consequences. This is my thorn.
Okay, and now it's probably a good time to get on the topic that really why you wanted to have this conversation. And I think if I characterize this wrong, correct me, but I think it's time to talk about your anger towards the medical community and the harm that it does to people who are in your situation. So with that, if I'm correct, go ahead.
Psychiatry and the ANC government are pushing this thing in the wrong directions, and this is where it links up with the Bella Bill as well. We are not seeing it in the children's curriculums yet, but it's going to come to a point where we are going to sit with the same thing that America is sitting with, where the parents cannot intervene in a child's decision to choose whether they're male or female. The child will determine that for the school, or in South Africa state, the ANC. And that is a very, very dangerous place to be. Now, I have seen on TikTok a lot of posting about what are your pronouns. And for lack of a better word, I want to shut myself. For black children to say that, they don't understand the risk they put themselves in living in a township and having corrective rape for saying things like that. But for the government, this is the ideal plan to break this country completely, and psychiatry is involved hands and feet. At Baragwana Hospital, at Joburg Gen, which is Charlotte Machacha or whatever it's called, at Steve Biko, and Grooteskiel in Cape Town. So all four provinces are pushing this crap. And psychiatry needs to be held to a higher standard. So they need to be held accountable. If you say that you do no harm first, and you do, then you are lying. Then you are not a medical practitioner. Then they should revoke your license.
But Chris, it's crazy because the medical community is a big proponent of pushing this stuff in the States, at least. I mean, the medical community, so many people there, doctors that specialize in this. And to me, I don't think they're trying to help people. I think they're trying to make money.
That's exactly the point. I mean, as an example of breast augmentation, we're going to give you a breast implant. at the stage I was thinking of, it was over 200,000 rand. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that is a lot of money.
The drug companies that are pushing this agenda, that medication is not cheap either. You are looking at thousands of rands a month to harm yourself. And then the medical doctors, the plastic surgeons and those, they make a small fortune out of every operation. And it's a 12-hour operation. So imagine the theatre costs alone.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So let me jump in and get a couple comments in here real quick, okay, Chris, coming from the audience, okay? All right, so I think our conversation today has actually helped some people understand some things better, which is fantastic. So, for instance, Francis Ruiz said that I never connected the dots between the drinking and PTSD from the war. Hubby stopped drinking a few years ago. Today I learned something. So I think that's very helpful. Maybe understand your spouse a little bit better. You know, when people come back from conflict or cops who served in the townships and they're different than they were before, I'm not saying that you have to excuse their behavior, but a little bit of empathy and try to understanding is necessary. But this was a time when we didn't talk about understanding people. So I understand where she's coming from there. Yeah, Charles Van Alsten said that regarding the question you've gone through the surgical procedure, that this is a wake-up call for those who think they're transgender. There's no going back. There is no going back. You can't change that. And you know what disturbs me, Chris, is the prevalence of this being pushed on our youth in America, to where now in universities, upwards of 35% of students claim that they're gay, transgender, or bisexual. That's utter nonsense. I mean, less than 5% of the population is homosexual. And that's not a criticism or a praise. It's a statement of fact. It's just a fact. But people want to inflate this stuff to, I guess, give it legitimacy. I'm not trying to delegitimize anything. I'm just stating the facts. I like to deal with facts. But the number of people who are actually legitimately have gender dysphoria is a fraction of 1%. But they keep trying to make it much larger than that. So it's very frustrating. And what happens is that they have these girls lopping off their breasts as teenagers. They're not coming back. You don't get your breast back, and having their genitalia altered, and then they're sterile. They can never procreate, only to later regret this. It's really scary.
See, the problem there too is psychiatry is not admitting that at the time when these children make these utterances, they are still busy going through puberty. If you want to know what confusion is, ask a prepubescent child. That is confusion.
Yeah, exactly right. That's the point I'm always making. You're talking about prepubescent and pubescent children whose brains are a mess anyway because of the hormones flooding into their body. Look, I mean, I'm not trying to diminish transgender dysphoria. I'm not at all. But we all were confused at that age. We all had things. I mean, look, I went through puberty and a part of my body got hard and very tender up here. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? That's not normal, but it is normal because the hormones surging through your body. So, you know, and it's an awkward time even for very attractive kids. Because kids are malicious. You know, you're ugly, you're fat, you're this, you're stupid. You know, why are your clothes like this? This is not something the medical community admits, which I think is the point you're making. And that's a point I've been making for years about this.
Yeah, it's too easy to play into that confusion and make a shitload of money out of confusion. And then comes years down the line, now you find there's a whole section of the population committing suicide. Because they cannot live with the mistakes they've made.
Yeah.
There are no children that are committing suicide because they are transgender or because they can't transition. They commit suicide much later in life because they've been robbed of true life.
Yeah.
That is why the church needs to step in and take a more prominent role in children's development.
Well, you know, it's interesting because, I don't know, are you familiar with Blair White, the American transgender? Yeah, Blair White. So Blair White is a conservative who is also very much angry about this movement. Born male, transitioned to female, and lives as a female. And Blair White is somebody that's very vocal about how this medical community and these influencers are harming children, and that's one of the reasons why I started watching Blair. I haven't watched Blair in a while. I've been busy, but I've watched her comments. I think, and Chris, this is interesting about this too. It's always the wackadoodles on the left who talk about conservatives and Christians who aren't sympathetic. I'm on the right of the spectrum. I'm not far right. I'm on the right, but I recognize Blair White as a female. Blair White has had the transition. Blair White is not pushing this on anyone else. Blair White is living Blair White's life, and I don't have a problem with that. But the left makes it out like people like myself have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with you trying to harm children. That's the problem I have, because it's irreversible. You can't go back. It doesn't work. It's not like it's not Legos. You can't reattach parts.
No, you can't. But the thing of accepting transgender people, it's dangerous, because you are giving them affirmation in what they are. If you're a man, that's what you are. Mm-hmm. Even if you are 0.1% that is gender dysphoric, that gender dysphoria can be treated without medical intervention.
Yeah, 100%.
Psychiatry needs to change their attitude to treatment. It's easy to say, well, this is how we're going to solve the problem. That's a lie. If I had the right psychiatrist, or if I had a Christian in my life that knew the gospel, then I wouldn't have transitioned. I would have fought the battle on a faith level. Faith is the key to this whole problem. The lack of faith in the world is this guy is insane.
No, it's a serious problem, and neither one of us are here to push faith on people or religion, but clearly it's made a positive change in your life. It's something you found. I talked to someone the other day, actually one of my viewers who lives in Utah, who was kind of lost and was very far politically left because of the nonsense that was out there, and they walked away from a church, and they returned to a church recently, and I'm not pushing it, and this person told me a dozen times in 4 hours how much better their life is now that they're not lost, and faith played a role in that. So if faith works for you, great. I encourage people, whether that's Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Wiccan, whatever it is, if it helps you find your place in life and it helps you feel comfortable, it makes a difference. Obviously, it's made a difference in your life. You're not as cranky as you were when you first came on the program.
I'll still get cranky. I mean,
we know. Hedda mentioned you being cranky earlier. So Hedda said sometimes Chris tosses his toys out of the pram.
I'll break the pram. I don't toss my things.
You break the pram. So a lot of this, Chris, goes back to a world that you and I grew up in which we were taught to bottle up our feelings. We didn't talk about our feelings. Men don't do that. And Husky said a short while ago, said the problem was that the men were taught not to speak about their experiences. It could destabilize the rest of the nation. He's talking about specifically coming back from the Bush War. But in general, this applies. He said they bottled up a lot and they didn't get any help. They were told they were strong. And that's the reason why people become, it's not an excuse, but it helps explain how some men become abusive. It's an outlet for them. Some men turn to addiction for gambling or porn or sex or alcohol. These aren't excuses. We're not making. We're trying to explain the causes of it. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, those are the symptoms.
Yeah.
And nobody is that strong that you. There is no delete button for what we've seen. I mean, I'm still on medication, not as much as I used to be. I refuse to take all that psychiatric shit.
Wait, Chris. Wait. Look, if you're going to go off your meds, I want to know about this.
Speaking of my meds, I had a easy fit with a psychiatrist. And I told him basically to piss off.
Well, I'll tell you now. I'll tell you now. The next time that you throw your toys out of the pram and chat on something bizarre, Hendo's gonna say Chris is off his meds again. Now, you know, when we started this program, one of the viewers said their kid was watching. They thought that I got an interview with one of the members of Led Zeppelin because of your hair.
Oh, right.
Yikes.
Yeah, my hair, I've still got a little bit of my hair left. I mean, I've chopped it since I've seen you.
Yeah, it's a little shorter.
Obviously, I don't want to, and this is not to try and hold on to that identity. So I'll get my hair a little bit longer so that if I do get into a conversation like this with someone, they are not going to argue with me that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm standing in front of you with breasts, with long hair, and everything else. If you want to argue with me, then you better come with very, very good hard facts.
So, Chris, Mad Max just gave a super chat for a question that came up. Oh, GPO just had a question. Where'd it go? GO 1984. I think you had a super chat that I missed last night. My apologies for that. Ask your question now if you're still here and without paying a super chat, and I'll try to answer it. Mad Max just said, it's just curious, how did you find my channel? Actually, I'm curious. I never asked you that. How did you find my channel?
Well, I wasn't following news. I wanted to know what was going on in the world. And I started scrolling and I was like, oh, here's a kernel. Okay, let's have a look. And that was it.
That was it. There you go. Well, that's pretty cool. No, because people find it. I mean, a lot of people found it this year because the RefG thing, and then the OGs like you, they've been around, the original gangsters been around for a while, found it for various reasons. Yeah. But some people refer to it. They talk about, you know, they're like, hey, you got to check out this guy. But you just found it. That's pretty cool. That's back when YouTube wasn't shadow banning me as much as they are now.
It's unacceptable. And the harm that's being caused by this time of shadow banning, it's hiding a lot of the truth from the population.
Yeah.
And that's the aim. That's the aim, is to hide the truth. Same as this gender thing. If a lot more people like me spoke out, these gender programs would cease to exist.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right about that. You know, and that's why one of the reasons why, like I mentioned, Blair White, why I kind of like and respect Blair White so much, because Blair White speaks about this and basically calls it for what it is, a bunch of hogwash. Yeah. Bonnie Duplessis just gave a stripper chat. Neither one of us are doing a stripper chat. That's for Ronaldo. But thank you, Bonnie, for the 40 Rand. I appreciate that.
Well, I don't want to say this, but I did work at Lolly, what was that place? Lolly Jackson Island? Somebody in the chat will know.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I was a stripper. I was a prostitute, sadly.
Oh, my goodness.
Those were all things to destroy myself because I knew the psychological impact that would have on my life. So even as a transgendered female, I just couldn't live with myself. Now, I did investigate to try and find out if that was still effect of PTSD or what it was.
Wow.
Yeah, what is a prostitute made of? A lot of money.
Well, Chris,
what teasers made of? A lot of money.
Chris, because you mentioned being a stripper, earlier in the broadcast, somebody they were saying it. They meant to compliment, but it was kind of a cheeky, so I didn't bring it up earlier. But they're saying that you were a very attractive woman. I mean, it was from the photograph we have on the poster there. Maybe a better looking woman than a dude. I'm just saying, you know.
Thank you. No, I can have the picture. I worked at another place in Bryanston. It was close to in. Yeah, right in Bryanston, in a whorehouse. It was all doctors, attorneys, advocates, judges.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
All the people in society that you would expect to have morals.
are probably the ones that have the lowest morals, actually. No, we see that it's across the board. Yeah, we see that. No, it's look. I mean, all we have to do is look at the Catholic Church and look at all the priests that diddle children to know that that's an issue. I just got to digress for a second here because Geo 1984 asked the question. Was asked the super chat, which I missed last night, so it's not related to this. But let me answer it. He says, Colonel, I was asking with regard to Indians in the refugee program. I've had some tell me that they're not applying because they're Muslim, and that would be looked down upon by the U.S. Geo 1984. There are 3.8 million Muslims in America. That's a conservative estimate out of 300 million. So about 1% of our population, a little over 1%, is Muslim. There are thousands of mosques across this country. There is no reason for a Muslim not to apply for refugee program if they're eligible for it. I'm not encouraging them. I'm not discouraging them. But what I'm saying is that the only reason a Muslim wouldn't apply is because they believe the bullshit that they hear in the media about America. This is a country where you're free to practice your faith as long as it doesn't harm others. So, yes, we have an issue with jihadism, of course. The world has a problem with that, but not with Muslims, not with Jews, not with Christians, not with Wiccans, not with Buddhists. You can practice your faith here, and you're welcome to do so. So those people that have told you that are listening to bullshit about America, where America hates Muslims or Trump hates Muslims, he hates immigrants. None of that is true. Tell them to stop listening to the bullshit and start listening to the real stuff or research for themselves. I had to give a presentation at the Tunisian Staff College, L'École d'État-Major, when I was a captain. Each of the foreign students had to present their country. I gave the presentation, and this is in 2000, to my classmates, in French, of course. They were aghast, or not aghast, but astounded, in dismay, or shock when I put up the figures for faith. I talked about Christians. I talked about the 9 million Jews in America, the largest Jewish country in the world, by the way, bigger than Israel. 9 million Jews, because they have 9 million people, 9 million Jews. They don't have 9 million Jews. We have 9 million Jews. And then I mentioned the 3 million Muslims at the time. They're like, what? Or 2.8 million. Like, you have Muslims in America? Like, yes. And you can practice your faith. So tell those people to stop buying the BS and start doing their own research, or just tell them to watch my program. Okay? You can do that. Madeline just says, hello, Chris and Chris Ehlers. Nice to see you. And Daisy gave a 99 Rand super chat. Chris, my goodness, we're going to have to do more of these. We're going to have to do more of these. I'm getting super chats.
There we go. At least I'm doing something good.
Of course you're doing something good. It's a good conversation. All right, so we've talked about a lot of things which most people consider quite sensitive. The challenges at the age around 10, you realize something wasn't right. A domineering father and a disciplinary childhood, an age that you and I both grew up in which men don't talk about things like this. Your service in the Bush War, which a few people know about, which you went through and respected. Everyone's respected it greatly. Your PTSD coming back, the treatment you got from noted psychologists who led you down a path that only caused you grief. And then you actually got married, and your marriage didn't work out. That ended. If I'm not too intrusive, were there any offspring? Did you have any kids? Or
no, so because my estrogen levels were so high.
So it reduced. Okay, couldn't. Okay, all right. So I was just curious. I mean, so if there's a little Chris running around somewhere, I was just wondering.
I was married for 9 years.
You were what?
I was married for 9 years.
Oh, wow. You were married for 9 years. That's quite a while. So then the marriage ended. You later transitioned, then detransitioned. You went through surgery. You went through a slight amount of hormones. And here you are today. You've come through all that. And you've also had some rather interesting experiences. You talked about, working as a stripper in prostitution. I wasn't expecting to hear that. That was interesting to hear. So here you are today. You come on the program a lot. We really appreciate you being here. I think you've mellowed a bit over the time you've been on the program. You don't throw your toys out of the pram nearly as much. Boy, you used to be very, when you first came on the program, people wanted me to ban you. They wanted me to.
Because I was racist.
Well, yeah, you were saying some stupid shit back then, and we gave you timeouts, and you didn't run off, and so I appreciate that. But there were several people who wanted me to block you, and I'm like, and then when people became aware of the transgenderism, people like, and then I said, look, you just got to be understanding. Let's be patient. And I'd have to argue now, Chris, and people, I stand on correction if anybody in the chat wants to disagree with me. I would argue that much of what you contribute in the chat now is actually helpful to the conversation, and it's interesting. Occasionally, you're throwing the toys out of the pram, but we just call you an old fart. We'll accept that. Old farts do that.
I'm also only 29.
Oh, you're only 29. Okay, well, I'm still 59, so at least I can admit that. Yeah, but no, it's hey, doesn't that suck? I mean, we were young once and soldiers, right? I mean, that's the title of the book by Hal Moore. But we were once young and soldiers, and we were once 18 and 19 and 20, and the world was our oyster. At least we thought it was.
Yeah.
Somebody typed my comment that you were saying some stupid shit back then. You were saying some stupid shit back then. Hendo can attest that. Hendo's been here throughout. He probably had to give you a couple of timeouts over time. But Chris, here you are today. And when I saw you at Opiplas, you give me this like, I don't know if I'm going to be around much longer. I mean, I hope that's not because your health is failing. Maybe you're just in a mood.
My health is failing very, very badly.
Is it because of the treatments or what?
No, because of the work I used to do. I mean, obviously, metallurgy is some of the chemicals you work with.
So working in metallurgy had a very devastating effect to your health.
And specifically because we work with a lot older technology. I mean, I know at Seeker Warwick, around the corner from where you live in Pennsylvania, they manufacture vacuum furnaces. Now, South Africa cannot afford that technology. So we had to work with salt baths, which work with cyanide and ammonia and ammonia cyanide. And when you're working with those chemicals for 12 hours, it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's that's what it is. Okay, all right. Because I got to tell you, Chris, you look a lot better today on camera than when I saw you at Opiplas. I mean, and not to frighten you, but you kind of look like death warmed over that day. But you had a scraggly kind of beard going. You look like you were homeless. So you're looking a lot better today.
No, I've actually got some good medication now that's helping me breathe a lot better.
Yeah, that's right. That day you were rasping quite a bit too. I was very concerned because I think part of it too is I think you're probably a little jazzed up because you put the event together and you wanted it to go well, and so I got the feeling that that was part of it.
No. It's just I would have liked to have gotten around more, but I just didn't have any oxygen to walk around to do anything.
Yeah,
I was like stuck in the corner with Matthew Dixon.
Yeah. Was Matthew Dixon at the Opiplas?
Yes, with Leo.
You sneaky little bastard, Matthew Dixon.
You were sitting with myself and Leowen and her husband.
Okay. Leowen, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. All right, well.
He was sitting there.
Gotcha. Gina Mullman said that, and I just met Gina. She's one of the viewers. I met her in person. Said, once upon a time we were all young and beautiful. Now we're just beautiful. I don't know about that, Gina. I don't know if we're still beautiful, but we were definitely young one time. That's for sure.
I'd say we're a lot more wise.
Well, yeah, but wise doesn't buy you a drink in a bar.
Thankfully, I've sworn off a lot of that kind of behavior. I'll have a beer around then, but it just doesn't do it for me.
Gotcha. Well, Leavitt just used her 51-month membership super chat as a platoon leader to say, met Chris at Opiplas. Very honored to have met this amazing person. Leavitt, haven't we met many times? But anyway, yeah, it's awesome. So Chris, I'm going to have to wrap up here shortly, but what I want to, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to share with people? You've talked about the harm that the medical community is doing to people. You've talked about very personal and deep experiences of your own, which we're grateful for. And again, I apologize to people for the poor quality of the audio, but it's on Chris's end. We couldn't fix it. What I promise to do is on my next trip, when I get up to where Chris is at, maybe we go to Opiplas and we use my mobile with the microphones, and then you'll be able to hear just fine. And we can talk about this again. How's that sound, Chris? Sound like a plan?
Yeah, that's a plan. Yeah, so I'd like to close off by saying parents have to be more open and approachable to their children, because these are difficult subjects to broach. So parents have to be an example for their children to be approachable. That is more than 50% of the problem or the bridge built. If a child can come to a parent and say, listen, this is how I'm feeling. A parent that listens well will know how to deal with this.
I think you're right
To
about
me,
that.
that's the most important thing, is to catch something like this at childhood and deal with it appropriately. Not say, well, you can't do that, or there are right ways of dealing with these very, very, very serious, confusing issues.
No, I got you 100%, Chris. I think those are wise words. And that's a great way to close the program. I want to thank everybody that's tuned in tonight. And I want to thank people for their overwhelmingly respectful comments that have been in the chat. This is a topic where some people can be snide and snarky and think they're being funny, but people are well behaved in the chat tonight. And for that, I want to thank you. And Chris, you asked me to do this a couple months ago, but the timing wasn't good. And so here we finally got to do it on a Sunday. Sunday's a relaxing day, so it's good that we got to do it today. I look forward to when I see you again, and maybe we can do this on my mobile, which works really well since I repaired my screen. I got my screen repaired. So, yeah, but anyway, so thank you so much for that. I'm going to put you in the waiting room. Don't disappear. I'm going to close up, and I'll come back to you in a couple minutes, okay?
Cool.
All right, folks, there's Chris Ehlers. Let me put that in the, okay, hang on a second here. But now I'm falling behind. I haven't done this a while. There we go. Put this, okay. I'll be right back with you in just a moment, okay? Put in waiting room. All right, folks, that was Chris Ehlers, or Christine at one point, with some very interesting revelations about his life that I had no idea about. I hope that you found that informative and useful. Again, apologies for the sound, but it's just some things we can't overcome, and there's nothing I can do about that. So thank you so much, and thanks for the super chats. Appreciate it. And for the questions. I hope I got to all the questions. I know I missed a few, but thank you so much. And I'll be back tomorrow with the news program. Maybe till later tonight, I'll be doing the Night Owls late tonight, but be back with news tomorrow. And Tuesday, we have a refugee in the United States who recently arrived here. We'll be doing an interview on that, okay? All right, so looking forward to that. Okay, guys, you guys take care, and thanks for being here. God bless. Cheers.